After 1 month spent in Norway, for us was time to go back home, empty-handed. We drove 3000 kilometers back to Italy to compete in the Italian Championship. And even if I won, I felt something was missing.
Un minimo di fatica all'este, one arm in the sky, Stefanino Ghisolfi si porta a casa l'unico e meraviglioso sorrisi, applausi da parte del pubblico all'ultimo.
So we decided to jump in our van and go back to the north for the second time. But unfortunately, the weather was not on our side, and we spent the first days waiting and training. Okay. And finally the sun came back, and I felt ready to try it again, this time with a different approach. Going back to Italy for a week helped me to reset my mind and my body, and this was the change I needed. You know, when there is the feeling that everything is perfect, the day is perfect, the weather is perfect. Well, it was not that day. Before trying the route, I went up with the Jumar to dry some holes, and I figured out everything was really wet. So I tried to dry them with some paper towels, and apparently it worked. And then I felt ready to do an attempt, but the sun was coming, so I was not sure if to go or to wait the next day. And after resting 1 hour, I decided to try it anyway. In the previous days, I did 2 very good attempts, and I fell on the second crux. So I understood it was possible, and I just need to wait the right day with the right conditions. And that day actually never came. Few holes in the very first part were already humid, so I thought, okay, let's try and let's see how I will fall. and I thought everything would come would be just an experience, and I would learn from it. And I tried my best anyway. I barely passed the first cracks of the route, and somehow I managed to stay on the rock with the tip of my fingers, and I was able to compose myself on this rest, ready for the next section. Before this attempt, I already passed this section 3 times, and honestly, this time was the one I felt worse. Fighting with some humid holds at the beginning and dealing with a bleeding finger made the challenge even harder. I climbed my way up until the part where I do the rope change. After clipping this quick draw, there is a good knee bar, and there I clip in my harness just for safety, so I'm not hanging on this long quick draw, and tell my belayer I'm in, so he can release his belay device and go to pull the rope after the roof section. So it's not an actual rope change, but it's more like a position change for the belayer to reduce the rope drag. And during all this process, I'm always climbing, not hanging, but safe because I'm always clipping a quick draw. And the belayer now can pull the whole rope and start belaying again from the new position. I took my time to rest very well, and in the meantime, the sun came, and it began to be very hot for climbing. The next part is the easiest of the route, so I was not worried to fall here. But it's always possible to make mistakes, and the sun was not super hot now because it just arrived, but it was starting to be annoying. I was climbing through these good holes, and I was start thinking if it was possible to pass the second cracks in these conditions. I really didn't know what to expect from this attempt, so I just kept climbing and I kept going. When I started this attempt, the pressure was low because I had no expectation, but after passing the first cracks, I start feeling a bit nervous. And for the fourth time, I reached the anchor of the first pitch of change. The sun was hitting my skin and I was start sweating and feel my climbing will be compromised. So I rested as much as I could in this last rest before the roof and the second cracks. I climbed fast this section that is easy but risky, and I reached the jug where there is the last rest before the main cracks that made me fall already 2 times before this attempt. I locked my knee in this uncomfortable knee bar and clipped this long quick throw. And try to reset my mind for the hardest section of this second part. And finally, I felt ready to go. I really don't know how, but I managed somehow to pass the second crux of the route, in the sun. And here, while I was resting as much as I could, I realized that I could climb the route in this attempt. And I didn't want to waste this attempt, because falling would mean climbing the whole route again from the ground, past the first crux, the second crux, and arrive again here. And this was the opportunity I was waiting and working hard for more than a month. So I fought hard to take advantage of this possibility. But I knew it was not over, especially for this move here that concerned me a lot before. But then I managed to pass this move too. And I rested again, preparing myself for the last battle. I knew the hardest part of the route was already over, but the long way to the top was still very bumpy, and I was already a lot pumped. For trying the route, I climbed this section a lot of time, but I never arrived here so tired. The feelings were totally different, and I felt it much harder than before. But I was hoping that knowing the route very well would just be enough to climb until the top. My fingers were bleeding and my forearms were pumped, but my feet were hurting the most, tied from the shoes and hot from the sun, and at this point I was already climbing for more or less 40 minutes. It was a painful experience, and I just hoped this knee bar would be better to give me some more seconds to rest. But it wasn't, so I started climbing again. So I passed the hard lock off and reached the last rest before a hard move that I was worried about. This was the place where I felt the highest pressure, because I was closer to the top, but I knew there was another hard move. And I was thinking while I was resting here that this was the last place on earth that I would like to be in this moment. I was getting more and more nervous and getting more and more tired while I was resting, so I knew I had to go, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to fail. And with the last energy in my body, I grabbed a good hold and finally understood I was going to climb the route. But actually there were still 15 meters to climb. They were not so hard, but there are two moves that I was a bit worried about. And I was worried because I never came so tired in this position. So I knew it would be harder than the last time I climbed this section. I know in these cases to maintain focus is the key, but it was not easy because on one side I was already thinking I was going to climb the route, but the other side I was worried to make some mistake and maybe waste everything and I had to climb again from the ground. And these two thoughts were distracting me from the thing I was supposed to be doing in this moment, that was climbing. And so it was in this moment that I fell. Just kidding. Enjoy the last part of the climb without my voice. And this was the end of the route, and the end of a beautiful trip and a long and hard process that forever changed my life.